If there's one thing that we can be certain of this November 3rd, is that we will be completely uncertain of what is going on. And there's a real fear that these mass protests that are being planned may break out into violence. And I think that's extremely likely. Now, I know it's another video of Tim Pool talking Civil War. They don't like it when I talk about Civil War, but I'm not making it up. Buzzfeed News brings you the story. The scary statistic predicts growing U.S. political violence, whatever happens on Election Day. 2 researchers claim that a single number they call the political stress indicator can warn when societies are at risk of erupting into violence. It's spiking in the U.S. just like it did before the Civil War. Great. They even mentioned that one of the researchers refers to the American Civil War as the first Civil War. Great. Hey, don't look at me. BuzzFeed's talking about it. Let's see what they're going on about. Many Americans are clinging to the idea that if Joe Biden wins the presidential election, calm can return to a nation riven by protests and rattled by President Donald Trump's authoritarian rhetoric. They love projecting, don't they? Not so fast. Caution to academics who claim they have devised a measure of political instability that shows that the nation will still be a powder keg that is waiting to blow, even if a Biden landslide means that Trump has little choice but to step aside. Quote, "The tendency is to blame Trump, but I don't really agree with that." Peter Turchin, an evolutionary anthropologist at the University of Connecticut, who studies the forces that drive political instability, told BuzzFeed News. Trump is really not the deep structural cause. Thank you. I've been saying this for a long time. Whatever's been going on in this country has been going on long before Donald Trump. And they say it may be wealth inequality. I don't completely disagree. It's one of the reasons why I'm for a progressive tax policy. But we'll get into that in a second. Let me read. The most dangerous elements in the mix, argue Turchin and George Mason University sociologist Jack Goldstone, is the corrosive effect of inequality on society. They believe they have a model that explains how inequality escalates and leads to political instability, worsened by elites who monopolize economic gains, narrow the path to social mobility, and resist taxation. Inequality ends up undermining state institutions while fomenting distrust and resentment. And I agree. I agree that wealth inequality does it. This leftist idea of privilege, I do not believe hits the nail on the head at all. I think it misses entirely. What I think happens is that you've got ultra wealthy elites who basically dictate policy because they're the people who can provide the resources for someone's reelection. Not completely, but I'll tell you this. The funniest thing about it is that the left is on the side of the massive multinational billion-dollar corporations. So why am I going to assume that a Joe Biden victory would do anything to solve this problem? I think Donald Trump is the better bet in this capacity. Now, Trump has only lightly tapped on the idea of wealth inequality, but he mentioned it was a problem. Donald Trump himself being a billionaire, but not one of these big corporate crony elites, at least as far as, I guess, reality dictates. Trump has his issues. Trump is a billionaire, but he's not Mark Zuckerberg, and he's not a big oil tech or anything like that. Regardless, I think it is fair to say that no matter who wins, there will be mass civil unrest. However, I just think Joe Biden's going to be worse, so that's just me, right? Let's read. Building on Goldstone's work, showing that revolutions tend to follow periods of population growth and urbanization, Turchin has developed a statistic called the Political Stress Indicator, or PSI. It incorporates measures of wage stagnation, national debt, competition between elites, distrust in government, urbanization, and the age structure of the population. Turchin raised warning signs of a coming storm a decade ago, predicting that instability would peak in the years around 2020. In the United States, we have stagnating or declining real wages, a growing gap between rich and poor, overproduction of young graduates with advanced degrees, and exploding public debt, he wrote in a letter to the journal Nature. Historically, such developments have served as leading indicators of looming political instability. I don't disagree. And I don't think Trump is doing everything to solve these problems. I mean, Trump is racking up massive national debt. He is, of course, before COVID, helping with unemployment, and America was doing better. That's why I think Trump's the better bet than Joe Biden. But I don't think there's a solution to this problem. There is a serious problem with inequality. Now, I'll tell you this. I'm in favor of college loan forgiveness because I think we've got a massive population of people who feel trapped. And their only solution is communism. For real. You go to school, you learn about all this communism stuff, you might not care. Then you graduate, you can't get a job, and sure enough, your only opportunity is some crummy or crappy or whatever low-paying job, your degree, you can't pay it off. Sure, we can argue that these people made these choices, but you got young people who are told to do it by our society, and now they're stuck. My opinion is that we should forgive interest rates. People should pay back the principal of what they owe, but no more racking up more and more debt. Just pay back what you spent, and we'll call it square. Otherwise, you get a bunch of people who feel like no matter what they do, they can't get out of this hole, so they get violent. He goes on to say, today with the nation in turmoil, Turchin's prediction seems remarkably prescient. We live in a pandemic hellscape that has disproportionately harmed Black and brown Americans and those living in poverty. We have widespread civil unrest over racial injustice, and we are hurtling toward an election in which Trump is stoking unfounded fears of voter fraud. Thanks, Buzzfeed. There's like a video that went viral of some dude like changing someone's vote, and the camera quickly pans away. But I don't even care about the voter fraud argument. You know, I'm hearing from people that they don't know where their mail-in ballots are, or they're getting a whole bunch. Trump says fraud. He shouldn't. It's impropriety. It's error. That's what it's all about. So sure, Trump is stoking the flames and refusing to commit to a peaceful transition of power. These people are such lemmings. We've gone through how many years of the Russiagate bunk BS? Spare me this, dude. I do think we are headed towards massive strife, and they keep saying civil war, but come on. In August, Turchin gave himself a pat on the back for his predictive ability with an analysis showing a significant rise in political demonstrations and violent riots over the last 10 years. But he and Goldstone fear that much worse is to come. Look at the Civil War buildup. I like how it's just some arbitrary number that we can't decipher. And they say, look, it's getting bad here, too. It's actually worse than before the first Civil War, he says. I love it. When Goldstone talks about America's darkest days, he provocatively calls it the first Civil War. He fears that we may be on way to a second one, with the 2020 election serving as a potential fire starter event. Am I wrong? I love how a lot of these leftists don't Google anything. And they're like, Gimble keeps talking about civil war. Haha, we're so smart. Is that the best you could come up with, dude? Come on. You could at least make fun of my appearance. When we have BuzzFeed News saying these things, isn't that you guys? Don't you like BuzzFeed? Okay, maybe they don't. Whatever. Fine. They say Goldstone has some credentials in predicting conflict. In 1994, shortly after the U.S. military's ill-fated efforts to support UN intervention in Somalia, which led to the downing of 2 Black Hawk helicopters and the gruesome spectacle of a dead U.S. soldier being dragged to the streets, Goldstone was tapped by the CIA to help lead the State Failure Task Force. This group of academic social scientists was asked to identify factors that predict when a nation is likely to spiral into chaos. The initial report, published in 1995, identified 3 risk factors that seemed to predict whether a state would fail within the next 2 years in about 2/3 of cases: high infant mortality, low openness to international trade, level of democracy. On the last measure, partial democracies were more vulnerable to collapse than fully democratic states or autocratic regimes. Let me tell you something. One of the reasons I'm in favor of a progressive tax policy and high brackets for the highest income earners is to prevent instability. I think it's fair and obvious that if you have oligarchs, people kind of revolt. Imagine this. Let's say we do have a progressive tax policy, by the way. It's exactly how our country functions. There have just been Republicans that have said they want a flat tax. I disagree with that. Think about it this way. Look at San Francisco. They have poop littered through their streets. Nancy Pelosi keeps winning, and there's no change in sight. What is a regular person going to do? Well, right now, people are fleeing San Francisco. I know many of my friends who live there have left a long time ago. I mean, long time ago in like this past year. What do you think happens if voting changes nothing and people are upset that you've got billionaires while they're walking through poop-laden streets? At a certain point, things destabilize. People feel like there's no chance to close that gap. And these individuals with tremendous power get away with everything while doing nothing. What does it look like we're at right now? Now, Trump was a reaction partly to this. Trump is a symptom of the growing instability. I remember when it I think Occupy Wall Street may be the start of this. We may talk culture war and all this stuff, but really, Take a look at Occupy Wall Street. When people were upset about Wall Street bailouts, you had the financial collapse. You had all of these banks getting bailed out. What about regular people? I'll tell you this, man. You want to talk about student loan debt forgiveness. I am not in favor of forgiving the entirety of their debt. I just think get rid of the interest rates, pay back what you owed, and we're square. Some people have said, you want to bail out the big banks and these energy companies, whatever, but you won't bail out regular people. I don't want to bail them out either. I don't want to bail the big banks. Let them collapse for all I care. But the economy would collapse too. Yeah, well, I know how to start a fire with 2 sticks. Okay, so I don't care. I know a lot of people will suffer if the economy tanks, and that's why they chose that evil, I suppose you could call it, bailing out the big banks. Okay, we got a bunch of young people laden with debt that are freaking out. Many of them are going and rioting. Not all of them have student loan debt, but we got to figure out this problem, man. Instability is heading our way. Trump is a symptom. People were tired of the crony elites who would never do anything for anyone. And they felt they had no voice, so they turned to a strong man. It's not going to solve the problem, but things are just continuing to destabilize. I think Trump actually held it off for a while. Could you imagine if Hillary Clinton won? I think this place would be way worse off. I really do mean it. Like we'd crumble. I don't know though, man. I think violence is coming. I don't think anyone can stop it. I'm not saying that everyone's at risk. I just think the instability is heading our way. So whatever. There's a lot more to break down here. I probably don't have enough time. I keep these segments short, but I got a couple more segments coming up. Stick around, and I will bring you some more on this in the coming segment.